It's no doubt General Motors dove head into electric pickup trucks, and they covered the extremes pretty well. On one hand, we had on-road performance with high horsepower numbers in the Sierra and a Silverado, and we also had off-road extreme in the Hummer EV. But for folks who like to do some adventuring, that off-road extreme might have been too extreme, and they want something a little bit dialed back. The good news is for 2026, the Sierra has 2 new models, and today we're looking at their off-road trim, the AT4, and this is probably going to be much more in their wheelhouse. Over the last few years, we've seen a few iterations of the Sierra EV, most recently going to be the Denali, but this is not just a different trim, but really a different persona. So Nick, what makes this different than the Denali? What makes it an AT4?
Yeah, so primarily it's going to be the accents you're going to find around the vehicle. So with GMC having AT4 as one of their sub-brands, with Denali, one of the features that you're going to see on all of them, whether it's internal combustion or electric, is the red accent. So you can see up here in the GMC logo that is in red, as well as the AT4 down there on the driver's side right. And these tow hook recoveries down below, tow recovery hooks, excuse me.
Yeah, so those are obviously there, one for looks, let's be completely honest. It's not an off-road vehicle if it doesn't have recovery hooks, but also this front end tends to look pretty different than we find in that Denali. Now, the last couple iterations of it, either the first or launch edition, I don't remember which it was called, and the Denali had much more of a futuristic RoboCop kind of look, and this feels a lot more like a conventional pickup. What do you think?
I really like it. You know, I think we discussed it off camera, but I really like it paired with this lighter color. Now, I've seen the other AT4 Sierras that are here in a darker color, and I just don't know if the body lines, as well as all the accents and features that make it an AT4, personally, I don't think it works as well as a lighter color. What about you, Travis? What color are you taking if you're buying?
You know, we had a choice and I decided to grab this lighter color. Maybe a gray would be as dark as I would want to go. But I will say, before we move too far ahead, I know there's more happening under the hood, but we'll circle back to that. Let's talk about some of the other AT4 features.
Yeah, so one of the big things that make this a more off-road capable vehicle is going to be these big old chunky 35-inch tires. These are going to be a 285, 75, 18. Now, 18 is important to remember because on the Denali, the first iteration of the Sierra we got, it came with up to 24-inch wheels. Now, a 24-inch wheel is going to be terrible off-road. Yes, you could do it, but if you damage a 24-inch wheel, you're going to have to spare some change to fix that. So the 35-inch tires gives us a little bit more traction. Obviously, these are all terrains, and a little bit more protection, some more squish, some more leeway while we're off-road. Now, that is one of 2 mechanical, tangible things that make this better off-road. The other one is inside that big old tire, and that is going to be a coil spring suspension. On the Denali, you are going to get air suspension. Here, you are going to get coil spring. It is going to be 2 inches higher than your standard suspension. So 8-inch ground clearance on your Elevation and Denali. Here, you're getting 10 inches of total ground clearance. Not having the air suspension has pros and cons, but we'll talk about that a little bit more in detail a tad bit later.
One of the things these AT4 badges promise is not just a little bit more off-road capability, but still everyday usability. And they're not willing to sacrifice, GMC, everyday function for kind of a unique use case. Case in point here, what we have is towing built-in standard here, and a lot of it, up to 12,300 pounds, probably more than your everyday off-road trailer is going to be using. But we have not only 7-pin harness connector right there, we also have the ability to plug in some cameras. So those are going to be your trailer cams, making everything a little bit easier. I'll admit this seemed more like a lifestyle off-road truck, but I don't think that's a bad thing. And I think a lot of those folks who are going on adventures for the weekend are probably bringing trailers. But this is still a regular pickup truck. Nick, show us some pickup truck stuff.
Yeah, so some of the cool features about this truck, and this comes on things that aren't the electric Sierra EV, but it's going to be this multi-use tailgate. So you can go ahead, press that, and this will fold down. Now, what this gives you is not only a space where you could put longer boards or 2x4s, whatever it may be, canoes, kayaks. Sorry, I'm getting attacked by bugs, so if I start looking weird, that's why. You can put that out here and it can stick out and you're not having to worry about it sliding around because you do have these barriers off to the side. Or if you have something that's around 9 feet long, you can go ahead and put this up and that will block it off. So you don't even have to tie it down. Yes, you still should, but this gives you kind of a backrest so those things don't slide out. But if I go ahead, put that back down, go ahead and press this button. Let me try this one more time. Press this button. And it makes it just a lot easier to get into your bed. And if you're someone that doesn't have long legs like me, it is hard to get into such a large vehicle. Now we're parked on uneven surface, so forgive me, it's still going to be hard. But you can climb up there, use that as a step. And one of the best features that I personally think is in this bed area is going to be this onboard power, or what GMC is calling their offboard power. So this is 10.2 kilowatts of power. Now this is available, so this is going to be part of a package. You have a 120, 120, and a 240. So essentially you could weld out of your truck. Now I don't know how reliable or efficient that's going to be, but you could weld out of here, which is pretty dang cool.
See, I see a lot of people bringing their trailer and being able to power their trailer off of their truck instead of running a generator. That is where I want to see it. Listen closely, everyone at a campground. But again, still a truck. The good news is we have a 5'10" bed. It's not a full 6 feet, but that's also pretty standard for what we expect these days in a standard cab or standard bed, 4-door pickup truck. But there's a little bit more going on. Nick, we've got a midgate.
Yeah, so with this bed length, I couldn't lay down, but with the tailgate down, I could, or you put down the midgate and you can get up to 10 feet, 10 inches of total storage in your bed area. Now we'll demonstrate that here in just a minute, but as I mentioned, 5'10" as your normal bed. With that tailgate put down, you can do 9 foot, around 9 foot, and 10'10" with that down. I think that is probably the second coolest feature in my book, right after the onboard power.
We did talk about there being some clever storage, so let's go ahead and dive on into it, and it's midgate time. Nick, I know you've been excited to see this midgate and try it, and you think you can go ahead and figure this out. So I have given no instruction. This is just how it would look if you walked into a dealership and said, I'm gonna try this. Here's our timer. Ready, set, go.
All right, I've never done this before. I swear, I've never done this. So let me fold down this seat. I don't even know if I'm doing this right, to be honest with you. No, I don't think I do that first. Hold on.
It's not the simplest process, and there are a couple of different configurations or ways this can end up. So what works best for you or what you need in that scenario is gonna be dependent on you. However, for this one, we are trying to go for the fully open midgate. So we'll see if Nick can get there. We've obviously got the seats down. We have a good start in leading with the window.
I'm gonna guess the window comes first. Okay, let's just put this here for a second.
I'll tell you, we need that a little bit more secure before we can move forward.
Oh God. Oh.
There's a time and a place for everything.
I hear something. Oh. Look at that. What's that time?
There we go. At 1 minute and 14 seconds, we have Nick completing the midgate. And again, this is his first time. Not too bad.
Heck yeah.
So now we've gone from 5'10" to, well, quite a lot more space because we're going right out here into the bed. There's a lot of room here, Nick.
10 feet and 10 inches of space. I mean, you could be sleeping inside and outside at the same exact time, but obviously that's not going to be the most use case. This is going to be for your larger items like a big old 2x4 or 2x8, wherever the heck it is. Anything of large nature that you can't fit in your standard pickup truck bed, this is just a neat feature. Now, I don't know how often you're truly going to be using this, but one, it's a cool party trick, and two, it's useful when you need it.
Yeah, and there is one more way we can set this thing up. Let me go ahead and set our camera down for just a moment. So if we need a little bit more space, all we have to do is drop the tailgate. We're not gonna drop it all the way. We're just gonna bring it down here and then lift this up. So now we can fit a longer item in and have that secure. I think that's what you were mentioning a little bit earlier. So this is the largest, most open configuration, but there are a couple different ways that you can have this set up. And I'll show you as I go ahead and put this back together. Now, I'm gonna lift everything up at once. I accidentally brought the seats with me. There we go. You can have this set up just so you only have the window out. And that's for folks who want to pretend this is something like a Toyota Tundra, or just want a little bit more open air, or maybe this is where the dog goes instead of having its head out the window. Either way, this is an option. If we take our window though, and we put that back in place, which you obviously want to make sure you do correctly, so no rushing that process. Once that window's in place, you can go ahead and open up these intersections so that you don't actually have to have the window all the way down. See if I can get out of the way. If you want to fold down one, you can only do it here on the driver's side. The passenger side, if you activate that, is going to fold down both at the same time. But again, you can split that up just a little bit how you need to. So this way, especially if you're like us in the Pacific Northwest, you can have that whatever it is in the bed without having this thing fully open. It's a nastier day. You don't want all that in the truck with you. Whether or not you consider that covered or uncovered cargo, I will leave to you, but there's a little bit more that is definitely covered up. Go ahead and go right to your camera, press that button, and this is gonna open up our front trunk. And it has about 11 cubic feet of storage capacity. Nick, how's the space in there?
Huh? Oh, the space? It's pretty good. It's not the coolest, but it's pretty good. I mean, it's enough to fit a 6'1" unit. Holy crap, that was hot in there.
I mean, there's a lot of room, unfortunately not a lot of air. Good news, there is an emergency release, so if I decided not to let Nick out, he would be able to do it on his own. We also have a couple cool features. We got a cup holder. We also expect to use this for something like tailgating, right? That seems like a great place to put the platter and the chips, and if you're just hanging around, it's just nice to have another space. It's easily accessible. It's got a button both inside the truck and outside, so this is the one you're gonna use a whole lot more. The one thing a truck doesn't have is a trunk, but this one has a very usable one.
And it does have an outlet too, so that's pretty cool.
In 2026, we now have some different powertrain options for your Sierra EVs, and those are gonna be dependent on the battery sizes and then the individual trims and sort of the output associated with it. So just to start, we have a standard range, an extended range, and a max range, but between those, unfortunately, General Motors won't give us any official capacities. But just know that max range is definitely at or just above 200 kilowatt hours. Now, how we pair those is gonna be a little bit interesting. You cannot get an AT4 with a standard range, but you can get a Denali with the standard range, which I find a little bit interesting, but we also don't get any power outputs for any of those standard range models, so we'll just talk about extended and max. I know there's a lot of numbers here, but bear with me. The AT4, which comes in extended or max only, is gonna be 625 horsepower if you go with the extended range, 725 horsepower if you go with the max. If we're looking at the extended range Denali or the Elevation, that's gonna be 645 horsepower. And if you want the Mac Daddy of them all, it's gonna be that Denali with that max pack, and that's gonna get you about 760 horsepower. And torque outputs all across the board, at least the numbers we have so far, pretty close. AT4 is gonna be at 775, which falls just 10 short of what we find over in the Denali with the max. But the important thing here is that an AT4 with the max range and a Denali should get you up to 478 miles of driving range, which is absolutely enormous. That means if you are going to go off the beaten path, if you're going for a weekend away, maybe you do want to do something like plug in your trailer or set up a drive-in movie theater, you'll be able to do it with your car and not worry about being able to get back home. But if you do need to charge, that's still gonna happen here on the back left, which is the easiest to pull into a Tesla supercharger station, but unfortunately no NACS connector here. Even though this doesn't have NACS, it still is gonna come with a CCS connector capable of 350 kilowatts. That means that if you're plugged in at one of those fast charge stations, you can get about 100 miles in just about 10 minutes. But since this range is so big to begin with, I don't imagine it'd be stopping very often. And if you do, it might actually be a breath of fresh air, because I know I want to get out, use the restroom, and pick myself up a tasty snack. Let's hop inside the Sierra EV and take a look at what they call this forest storm interior, and it turns out that's exactly what we found ourselves in, a bit of a forest storm. Now, as far as the actual layout of everything goes, it's pretty much exactly like what we found in the Denali last year and then the launch edition the year before. But thematically, the difference is really only going to be in some of the actual materials and the texturing. The big thing here is that we get the same two-screen layout. That's going to be your main driver display, which is much smaller than we find on the infotainment screen. Obviously, that infotainment screen, not just large and in charge, about 17 inches, but it does a really good job of integrating not just digital switches, but also physical ones. So we'll go over some of the screen layout here in just a second, but I actually want to touch on these physical switches, literally touch on them. Nick and I are running 2 different temperatures at the moment, but this is a toggle switch up and down for most of these functions, and that means that it's less buttons and easier to pull together. But these are the things you're going to need on a more frequent basis, and that way you don't have to dig through the infotainment screen to get to them. The only one that I'm going to use regularly that I have to press on the digital switch, as it were, is going to be for my heated seat, but that'll come just a little bit later. Now back to the screen itself. The first thing we talked about when it comes to the AT4 is going to be software, and all of these different softwares that are leading us to more off-road capability, because it's not going to be a mechanical connection. So we're here in the drive modes, where the added feature to this particular one, besides what we get standard, so normal, off-road, and towing are going to be found in other trims, is we now have this terrain mode. Now it's going to ask if you want to make sure, like really make sure you want to be in terrain mode, because it is going to turn off things like your stability control and your traction control. We do want to do this if we're trying to navigate tighter situations. And that's exactly what we're going to do in the off-road and the terrain modes, is it's going to basically free up that rear wheel steering to be a lot more active. You don't want to do that regularly because it's going to be harder on that system, and especially at higher speeds, it's not necessarily going to create instability, but you want to be able to predict the way the vehicle is going to operate. So those are 2 things that you're going to use more often here. But since we do have the max battery, we still have the Thor's hammer performance increase. So we press that Thor's hammer, we get our little sound effect, and then up on that driver display, it'll let us know that we are in fact using that increased performance. For some reason, that turns on our radio, which we had turned off a little bit earlier. I suspect that might be a pre-production thing. For the rest of the interior, like the seating position is really, really comfortable. Again, this Forest Storm interior looks nice, but I'm very comfortable here at 6 feet tall. But you can see, even though I'm the traditionally longer torso person, I have tons of headroom, and in just a bit, we'll get Nick in there in the back to talk about what space is like back there. But we also have a heads-up display, which means that even though we have lots of screen real estate, you can keep your eyes looking forward and have all the information that you need there. Things like your turn-by-turn directions, those are going to be Google-based, because remember, if it's a GM EV, it doesn't have the ability, at least most of them, don't have the ability to use your Apple CarPlay or your Android Auto. So Google is built in here, which is, I think, the absolute minimum. But one thing that's a bit of a downer is that the AT4 trim only gets a 7-speaker sound system. And as much as I don't need 20, 30, or 40 speakers in my vehicle, 7 seems like it's a little bit low, especially for a vehicle with a cab this big and a price tag as large as it ends up being.
Travis has a ton of room up in the front, and so do I in the back. Now, we have this seat pushed forward pretty far, but even when it is nearly fully back in its tracks, I still have quite a few inches between my knees and the back of the seat. Now, amenities back here like storage and charging and heated seats. You have a storage compartment behind that seat. Lots of storage down here with 2 cup holders. A little cubby right here with the removable rubber insert, as well as a small little cubby storage down below, right below your dual USB-C charger. You have 2 vents back here, no tri-zone climate control, so that is only going to be dual. So that's kind of a downfall in my book. For around $90,000, I would like maybe a tri-zone climate control, but it is a pretty open, airy cabin. You do have heated outboard seats in the second row, 2 more cup holders, 2 more in this fold-down armrest. So altogether, there is a ton of cup holders. So if you're looking to store your drinks, this truck has got you covered. But in terms of legroom, 44 in the front, 44 in the back. So you can expect most people are going to be accommodated in terms of space. Now above us, really helping open up this overall darker cabin, is going to be this pretty much front to back fixed glass roof. Now this is not a sunroof, it's not a moonroof. This is just going to be a glass roof, giving you that open, airy feel. And again, on a day like this, where it is stormy and dark outside, midday too, it really makes it feel like a more open space to be.
Now to get this out on the road, the first thing we should talk about is power, because this has a lot of it, but a little less than the Denali. 725 horsepower, but when you go ahead and get into your driver menu, click on the drive modes, activate that little Thor's hammer, which is still there, even though this isn't the top performance model. When you put your foot down, we'll wait until that vehicle gets out of the way, this thing absolutely moves. 725 horsepower, 775 pound-feet of torque. We got 0 to 60 in about 4.5 seconds, and that's pretty good for me.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive to see a nearly 10,000 pound vehicle accelerate that quickly. It honestly doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but it's really impressive nonetheless. And it's I think, needed in an application like this. Anything less than 500 would make this thing such a dog. It would be not fun driving.
Yeah, there's a weird world where it's so big that it needs to be so powerful, especially make sure that it's not unsafe to drive, because there actually truly may be situations where you need to power out instead of brake in a situation, because the power is going to get you moving a lot quicker than the brake's going to stop you from doing it.
You know what, I just thought about this, and it's interesting how we have a 700 horsepower pickup truck from GM. Mm-hmm. But we never got a 700 horsepower pickup truck from GM that wasn't electric.
Right.
Ram has one. Mm-hmm. Ford has one. We never got one from Chevy.
Ram had one, but yes. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, you can still buy one on the lot.
Sure.
You guys get what I mean.
Yeah,
but it's just, I wish they would have gave us a gas one. Maybe one day if the tides turn. But I mean, nonetheless, it's fun to have an electric truck. It's just a little bit more. It's just different.
It's a totally different experience. And what else is different here is that this model has a coil suspension and not an air suspension. And the reason I say that is because every other version of this platform that I've driven thus far has had that air suspension, and it's felt like it's been really important. So I was a little bit nervous getting in here about how is a standard suspension going to handle this weight in the way that a consumer would want to. Obviously, there are very heavy vehicles that can function just fine, but are they fun or interesting to drive? And I have been pleasantly surprised. This suspension handles everything really nicely, at least everything we've tried today. This is not the performance model in terms of like street performance. We already get that on something like the Denali. Not only is it a ton of power, but it's a much more street-oriented suspension. This road does two things. It acts as a regular road, and then it also acts as like your testing ground, because some of the roads around Michigan are not the best.
Yeah.
And it's been great to see how this handles regular smooth pavement, which is nice. Also, we have really big tires, but we're not dealing with really big tires. It doesn't feel like there's not any power, obviously, getting to them, but we're also not having to deal with a lot of noise, even though they are relatively aggressive tread. I don't know, I think this whole package came together pretty nicely.
Yeah, I have to agree. The tires are pretty beefy, and those help a lot with how cruddy these Michigan roads are. It's shocking. We're both from the Pacific Northwest. He's on a different side of the state than I am, but the roads up there seem pretty bad until you come to the east side of the states and you realize how good we have it.
Yeah, we don't have winters quite like they do.
We do have RTA taxes.
That's true. Now, I will say that one thing that I'm not surprised with in a bad way is the efficiency that we got. On our way out to where we were filming, we drove about a 42-mile loop, and that got us 2.5 miles per kilowatt hour. That's pretty good considering, again, the tires that we have, how much power it is, obviously how heavy, and the fact that this has a 2-inch suspension lift. That's not going to help with aerodynamics at all. Obviously, there are vehicles that get better than 2.5, but that tends to be pretty good, and it makes sense because with that bigger battery and a 478-mile range, you have to be able to make the most of the battery that's on here. There's plenty of battery, but they're doing a good job with it. Now, Nick, this is your first time behind the wheel of the Sierra EV, and we're doing it in the off-road portion of this event, but this is more off the beaten path than off-road. But you spent a lot of time off-road when we're back home. What about this stands out in making it an off-road capable vehicle?
Hey, you know, one of the first things that really strikes me as something that I would like in my personal vehicle to go off-road is the rear steer assist. That is something, especially with a vehicle this large, this is a massive vehicle. And in a lot of trail situations, especially in the Pacific Northwest where we have a lot of trees, rocks, roots, whatever it may be, lots of tight turns, it's nice to have that option to be able to turn those rear wheels and swing that back end around a little bit tighter, because without it, this truck is pretty much useless off-road. It's over like 200 and almost 220 inches.
And not only is it enormous, but it's got a huge wheelbase, right?
Huge wheelbase,
and that means that maneuverability is going to be very tough. So it's nice that they have that feature, but it is almost a requirement to make this functional in a lot of different scenarios. Now, what we've been doing is using the off-road mode. And there are a couple different drive modes built into this. Off-road mode basically releases that rear wheel steering to be a lot more active. When you're doing daily driving, that's not what you want to do. You can see the vehicles up in front of us here are using that function. Now, what we're going to do is switch over into terrain mode. So from off-road to terrain, I'll go ahead and get us switched over here. It's going to be through our drive modes, which you do have to go ahead and get in through the menus, not going to be everyone's favorite. But once we switch into terrain, what it's going to do is be a little bit more sensitive to everything you're doing. So very much a software-based vehicle. Off-road is meant for higher speeds. This is meant for a lot of more anticipated slippage, and again, a lot more use of that rear wheel steering.
Yeah, it's definitely going to take advantage of all of the technology and kind of computer controlled situations. So if one wheel sees more slip than the other, it can cut power to that one wheel, just like most cars can do with their all-wheel drive systems. It happens a lot faster because it is computer and electric rather than having to deal with an internal combustion engine and all of the other stuff. This just happens so fast, but the terrain mode, it's really going to kind of take place of your lockers, because this truck does not have any sort of mechanical or electronic lockers front or rear. It is not going to be as capable as, say, your Hummer alternative, because the Hummer is double locked.
Yeah, so there are going to be a couple of vehicles in this segment, which we'll call the electric truck category, and that are a little bit more off-road capable. We'll throw capable out there because people are going to be, they're going to have their own opinions on the matter. But when you look at something like a Cybertruck that has a locker, and the Hummer EVs, excuse me, both the SUV and the truck, those will both also have lockers. This one does not, and that doesn't bother me. I don't think most people are trying to take something like this off-road regularly or off-road in a way that they really need a ton more capability. But what we're using is a brake-based system, and that's what you find in a lot of what I would call soft roaders, because it is going to help you with that traction, but it's not going to be a full locked situation. But again, should be fine for here, and because everything is so digital, it happens very, very quickly, and it should be one that we don't really notice. Unfortunately, today we won't really get a feel for it, but we do get really nice tires for this particular arrangement. We also get 18-inch wheels, which I find almost hilarious, because on other trims of this, and not just this, but a Hummer and the Silverado, which are obviously siblings, you can get up to 24-inch wheels. And here we've just got baby 18s, and I'm glad, but it gives us so much tire. I think that's important because this doesn't have the air suspension. That's one thing that would help off-road. It does give us an additional lift over the standard Denali, but that's at the standard height. Obviously, it can continue to raise the air suspension, but a lot of that tire is going to do a really good job of absorbing just about anything we run into. And even though we're not hitting a bunch of obstacles, this is bumpy and this is going to be more uncomfortable than your everyday driving, and it's doing a really good job of managing all that.
Yeah, actually, I think it's pretty plush for what it is. You know, I think about what has to go into trying to make a spring and a shock absorber that can withstand this amount of punishment, because any sort of bump or sway of the body of this vehicle, think about how much force that is putting on each corner of the vehicle, because it's so heavy and there's so much weight distributed pretty much evenly throughout the chassis. And I'm kind of astonished that they can get this type of ride quality as well as performance out of a coil sprung suspension, because it's pretty common to see air suspension in an off-road application like in the Rivian R1T. That has up to 14 inches of ground clearance if equipped with air suspension. So that's about 4 more than we get here at 10 inches, which is 2 over your nominal 8 inches of ground clearance. So the suspension is actually really nice. If I was in the market for this and I got to do a little bit of what we're doing now while testing and seeing which one I want, I don't even know if I would go for the air suspension like in the Denali. I think this might be just enough for me, and it does help save costs, because air suspension is going to be a little bit more expensive. But if you didn't want the off-road trim and you didn't want air suspension, I would highly suggest going to the Elevation, because the Denali, correct me if I'm wrong, comes standard with air suspension.
I'd have to double check on that, but it's going to be in most of the models, if not all of them. Yeah. And it's obviously going to be a price point thing. Most people aren't probably buying nearly $100,000 trucks to go ahead and take them off-road. Most people don't probably want to get them this dirty, but it's handling everything we've done so far, and we know just by driving this, it'll handle quite a bit more without too much issue. But that's really the extent of this off-roading adventure. I guess the other thing we get to make use of is these cameras, but that's going to be on most of your Sierra EVs. Yeah. It does help, especially when you have something this big.
With the addition of those 2 extra trims, the Elevation as well as the AT4, the pricing is going to get a little bit muddled. So I have it all written down. I want to make it clear for you guys. And let's start off with the bottom trim. So the Elevation standard range is going to be about $65,000 with its $2,000 destination included. Extended range jumps up to $72,000 and some $72,500. And when you go to your AT4, you're going to be looking at $81,395 to start. Now, when you go up to the max range like we have here, it jumps up $10,000. Definitely not a cheap upgrade, but it might be worthwhile if you are someone that needs that extra range. That is $91,695. Now, where it starts to get a little bit muddled is, even though this isn't the top trim Denali, this is more expensive than some of the Denali. So a standard range, $71,795, and an extended range, $79,995. But if you wanted to go for the top dog, fully loaded max range Denali, that is $100,695, including its $2,000 destination. Now that essentially means you can get every trim of this vehicle that isn't a max range, you can get the federal tax credit.
Yeah, so as long as the MSRP is under $80,000, which as Nick mentioned, a lot of these do fall under, that's gonna make this truck a whole lot more affordable. And it's probably not something you're worried about as far as fueling goes, but obviously in most cases, running an electric vehicle is gonna be cheaper than running a gas vehicle. And since this is gonna be a lot more competitive in pricing, and as Nick and I both know, truck prices just keep going up regardless, this makes it a lot more attractive of a buy as long as that federal tax credit is still in place. But regardless of the pricing, looking at this versus a lot of other trucks on the market just as they are, Nick, this is a really nice truck.
Yeah, I really enjoyed my time with it. And I think it's a beautiful, you know, at first when these electric GM products came out, these pickup trucks, I was not a fan. To be completely honest with you, I think they looked terrible. I have changed. I've changed sides. I've loved the way this looks, especially with the lighter paint color and all of the trim accents that you have for the AT4 trim. I think it looks pretty good, and I think Travis thinks the same. Let us know down in the comments what you guys think, not only the looks of it, but the performance as well as the efficiency. I want to know what you guys have to say, because you guys have a lot to say. That is going to do it for Travis and I's time here in Michigan, checking out the latest AT4 Sierra EV. Let us know down in the comments what you think. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, do all the things down below, and make sure to leave a comment. Thanks, guys.